check in with our great friend, Brent Beaird. Does a great job for First Coast News and college sports. Today, Brent, we're talking minor league ballparks today. That's where we're at on June the 5th. Did you have a favorite, maybe, that you like to visit, either past or present?
I would kind of go with you on Wilson Park. A lot of memories there. I remember covering some of the high schools I actually played there years ago, and what a treat that was for them. Wilson Park would be good. I do want to get up maybe during SEC Media Days, which is around the corner now, and go and see the new park. I've heard great things about it. I am glad that they've kept the SEC baseball tournament in Hoover, which I understand is a natural place for that to be, but glad for regions and where that's going to. So hey, just want to make a quick comment before we get in the SEC on new Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren. Trav, to tie it into what we talk about, Warren actually worked with Mike Sly, former SEC commissioner, in a law firm early in his career, and said that Sly, to this day, still has a great impact on his life. So I thought, and by the way, that choice was pretty surprising too by the Big Ten, but not surprised with Mike's life and it having an influence on someone's life.
A historic hire by the Big Ten, because Warren is the first African-American Power 5 commissioner to date. So good for the Big Ten, good for Mr. Warren. And, yeah, that's interesting, the tie between Mike Slive and so many of these risers in the athletic department industry, conference industries that we're seeing now. And I'm left to wonder, on the heels of the Southeastern Conference spring meetings, what would Mike Slive have said in relation to Will Wade last week down in Destin, Florida, if posed that question about what's a roadmap for Will Wade, Mike?
There's probably a good chance that he would have probably never said anything, because Wade would have been gone long before then under Mike Slive's tenure, don't you think?
Perhaps. Mike was Mike Slive was very member supportive. He came in, as you recall, with that plan. The SEC at the time was everybody was ratting on everybody to the NCAA, as you remember. And Slive created that sort of environment where and self-accountability and those things where he wanted it on the conference level first. He wanted your first issue, your first complaint, to go to the conference level before going to the NCAA. And under Roy Kramer, it seemed like everybody was just bypassing the conference office, going straight to the NCAA. Alabama certainly felt that sort of scenario play out in its own right. But what struck you most from those SEC spring meetings down in Destin last week, Brent?
Oh, I would say easily I know all the alcohol was a big thing for a lot of people, but Trav, to me, the officiating and the transparency with Steve Shaw and what he said was what struck me. And look, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but they actually talked about having a midweek show on the SEC network during the season where Shaw explains some of the more controversial calls from the previous Saturday. That'd be appointment television, wouldn't it, Trav? To have something of that nature. Shaw actually did an interview with the Baton Rouge Advocate on the controversial calls in the A&M LSU game, and explained a lot of those when I don't think we've ever seen that happen before. And listen, I think to Shaw's credit, he said we want to be more transparent as officials. Look, I know they've got a hard job but there's also times to where, and one of the more interesting things to me would be, what did you see when you made that call? So to me, the officiating was the most interesting thing in the meetings.
Yeah, and I understand the point about transparency, and that sounds all well and good, but I'm guessing, too, it wouldn't hurt the SEC network ratings to have that sort of programming or have that sort of segment even on an existing SEC network program in the afternoons. Let me ask you this. We're getting a lot of TV times now for early season games, really pretty much covered on those. One game that struck me that I wasn't aware of, when you talk about a neutral site game, Mississippi State and Louisiana Lafayette getting together in New Orleans. Now, is that going to actually be in the Superdome, or maybe just play that one at Tulane, Brent?
You know, that's a great question. I've got to check on that, to be honest with you. Beyond that, I really don't know. That'll be fascinating to see. State needs to be careful early on without Nick Fitzgerald, and more than anything else, Trav, that defensive line and that defense that sent 3 guys to the NFL in the first round, to where that they need a little bit of time to replace that bunch. I mean, I think they'll win the game. I think they've got the better team, but they don't need to take anything for granted in September until they get a little more seasoning.
Yeah, I was pretty much tongue-in-cheek on that. That game between the Raging Cajuns and the Bulldogs of Mississippi State will be played at the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. I guess if you don't make it to the Sugar Bowl in some form or fashion, you just schedule a trip down there. Brent, let's talk about some other games on the docket. Of note, when you talk about more 2-for-1s that we're seeing in scheduling too, Ole Miss and Memphis. I think that's a big, big game right out the gate for Matt Luke on the road up there at the Liberty Bowl.
How hot will it be, Trav, at noon on August 31st?
Blue blazes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, Norvell, the coach at Memphis, really had a lot of people thought he was leaving last year. Instead, he stays, and the folks in Memphis think this is going to be a pretty good football team. I watched the Ole Miss spring game and was impressed again with the talent they've got. Matt Corral, obviously, going to be the quarterback this year, but there's no doubt if you're looking for an early weekend game that could be pretty enjoyable, if they can stand the heat, Travis, that could be a 42-40 thing before it's over.
I think it could easily be that. Ryan Silverfield, the associate head coach there at Memphis under Mike Norvell, interviewed here at Alabama for the vacant offensive line job in the last coaching turnover at UA. Unfortunately for Ryan Silverfield, he interviewed with the wrong offensive coordinator. He interviewed with Dan Enos like 12 hours before Enos bolted for Miami. So a little tie-in there to Alabama football with Memphis. Now, the bowl lineup for 2020, looking ahead a little bit, going to have a different feel to it. No Shreveport for the SEC potentially, Brent, when it comes to 2020.
I think they will give up Shreveport for Vegas, won't they, Trav? There'll be a lot of guys who want to go out and cover that one before it's over with that SEC and Big Ten. I mean, there are obviously some pretty interesting memories for Shreveport early on. But yes, and by the way, if folks hadn't heard, we have some natural interest in the Gator Bowl. That Gator Bowl this year on January the 2nd. Remember last year it was on at the end of December, so they're hoping that's going to help attendance and ratings and so forth at that point. But yeah, the Las Vegas Bowl is one that's getting all the attention.
Come on, Brent. Bossier City and Vegas. You both got casinos. You know, what's the difference? I've been to both. They're right there neck and neck when you talk Vegas.
Absolutely, they are. Yeah.
And Bossier City.
Destinations everybody has to make at one time or another in their life.
What's the feeling down there, Brent, in relation to Landon Dickerson? the Florida State offensive lineman, who we're hearing at BamaOnline.com, and you're probably hearing on your end down there in the state of Florida, a lot of momentum in relation to a potential transfer as a graduate to right here at the University of Alabama.
Dickerson at Florida State, his first year was really good, and then after that, he just couldn't stay healthy. Listen, the two things that he would get at Alabama that he didn't get at FSU, one would be better coaching. Two will be infinitely better training staff than he did at Florida State. Now, I don't think he's going to take over any starting position necessarily, but I mean, he would give you a big body and some depth, frankly. And a lot of people we talk to say when he's healthy, he's pretty good. I mean, their offensive line has been abysmal at FSU the last couple of years, so he'll be in a much improved situation than where he was in Tallahassee.
Yeah, what's the expectation? Speaking of Florida State, what's the feel or the vibe going into year two under Willie Taggart in that fan base? Is there a sense of bounce back, or is it almost dread looking ahead for the Seminoles post Jimbo Fisher?
I think it's more dread than it is bounce back, frankly. They are, but I mean, James Blackman's a pretty good quarterback. I think Cam Akers at running back, DJ Matthews, who is from Jacksonville. They've got, and Tamari and Terry are two pretty good receivers. They've still got enough Trav defensively where they could be good. Now, they've got an early game in September where they go to Syracuse, and that's a big game for them, but particularly the way that thing's turned out as of late. But I don't think anybody expects it's going to be much better than 5-7, but see, here's the reality. A lot of folks saying, well, if they're 5-7 again, he's going to be gone, isn't he? I mean, you would think that would be the case, but the reality of it is, FSU beat writers would tell you they're not sure FSU's has got the money to buy him out and that staff, and then to bring a new staff in. But Trav, at the same time, if they put another 5-7 on the board, and you see this thing's not going anywhere at all, that's good. That's a difficult decision for them to be able to make. And obviously, they just promoted their interim AD to full-time and permanent AD. So if that thing's going south in about October or so, it will get very interesting down here.
Yeah, we talked about Florida State in the past, the perception being that the program, the athletic department, is flush in cash. I've never found that to be the case at all. I mean, not poverty level by any means, but not at the level of an Alabama or a Texas A&M for sure, that can just stroke checks, to fix mistakes. It makes a major impact, makes a far bigger impact on that athletic department as a whole when that does happen than it does at
they're still
some other
recovering
places.
from Jimbo being there. In the program really being stuck in the mud for a while, regardless of what Jimbo said the other day, that he left it in fine shape. But I've talked to some people on some of their boards, and that's the same thing they say. They say, look, we don't have the people, the money that people think we do, and some of that is, Trav, compared to a lot of schools, particularly in the SEC, they just don't have the alumni spread out who are willing to put that money in at this point. I mean, they may have that in sometime in the future, but right now, you hit it on the head. They're not printing money down there in the financial department and or the athletic board either.
No, in comparison to Florida, they're not even close when it comes to cash at Florida State. Hey, Brent, I wanted to ask you, we're talking with Brent Beaird of College Sports Today and First Coast News on Southern Fried Sports presented by Mercedes-Benz of Tuscaloosa. Wanted to talk first-year starting quarterbacks coming up in the Southeastern Conference. Give me the guy that you think will make the biggest impact on his team, whether it's Vanderbilt, whether it's the two Mississippi schools, Arkansas going through transition at quarterback in year 2 under Chad Morris. Which one of these guys do you think by the middle of the season we'll be taking real notice of at that point?
Well, if they were better at developing quarterbacks at Auburn than they are, I would be tempted to say either Joey Gatewood or Bo Nix. But the way they have developed quarterbacks there over the years, I'm really not sure that, frankly, is going to happen. But I mean, they very well may be to where as good as that defensive line is, and I hear that offensive line is very improved to where that I think at this point that can happen. I mean, we mentioned Matt Corral a few minutes ago. I may go with him, Trav. From what I've seen and heard about him, he has been tremendous. And have you seen? He's got a really good arm. They've still got some fine receivers in that lineup. So at this point, I may go with Corral.
Yeah, a little, pretty big shift in offensive philosophy.
Yes.
In going from Phil Longo, who's based, I believe, more in air raid principles, whereas Rich Rodriguez, it's going to be a spread look, but it's going to be a power spread. But you're right, Corral's still going to have an opportunity, both with his legs and his arm, to put up some decent numbers. I'm a Bo Nix bandwagon guy. I'm on the Bo Nix bandwagon because I think the guy just has the it factor. But going into sort of what you outlined with Auburn's struggles to truly develop quarterbacks at the base level, the thing that Bo Nix has that these other guys haven't had is that he lived it. He lived with a quarterback in his father, Patrick Nix. So I'm banking on that being a difference in Bo Nix in terms of his readiness and his preparation for this point in his career. But it'll be a lot of fun to watch play out. Hey, Brent, as always, great stuff here on the program. Look forward to catching up with you down there in Crescent Beach coming up maybe in a couple weeks.
That'd be great. Look forward to seeing you too. And Trav, we got the approval for SEC Media Day credentials yesterday. I think they send that out as a kind of to everybody. So that lets us know we'll be in Hoover before we turn around, right?
That's the one credential you don't struggle to get from the Southeastern Conference. Yeah. They want everybody there, Brent. I mean, if they can get 3,000 people credentialed so they can say it on SEC Now, they love it. I think I'm going to apply for our Palm. I'm going to see if I can get Foo credentialed this year. Maybe bring him along. Nick Saban took his dog one year, so
give him a first and last name. Probably better leave the picture off, but beyond that, he might get in.
I don't even know if they look at the picture, man. Just submit it. I think
can we get Pops in? Do you think? And just give him a recorder and put him in the print room and see what questions he might ask.
Yeah, you worry about him sneaking a little old number 7 into that Dr. Pepper that they give you. That would be a concern.